Good evening, Des Moines. Welcome to the Doc and Lefty program here on webcast1live.com. It is Tuesday night, and so we are here bringing you the perspectives you love from the sides you hate. I'm going to withhold the rest of the intro and get to my my good friend and partner, Doc Petrosh, the answer to the question nobody asked. Doc, how's it going?
You know, it's going pretty well. Everything's going... Hey, I'm off center. Oh, my goodness. I look like I'm left... Oh, no, I'm right of center. I'll be all right.
Hey,
I'll have to scoot it over. There
you know what?
go.
We've always known
right
you're
on the beat.
We've always known that you're a little tilted. But anyway,
Yes, absolutely.
Generally we do the rundown of the show. We kind of pass it back and forth between ourselves, but we've got a lot to talk about. We've got a guest calling in a few minutes, and hopefully if my last-minute wrangling gets our second guest...
or one of Doc and Lefty's reporters on the ground from Ferguson, Missouri.
Hopefully. He'll be calling in at 7 o'clock. Sometimes these instructions get lost in translation. But anyway, we got a lot to talk about. I know that you were desperately wanting to dig in to the Rick Perry indictment that came down last week. And so we'll spend the first few minutes talking about that. Then our good friend of the show, super duper friend of the show, representative, I think probably come this next swearing in, it'll be former representative, but I still believe that he's in office. Tom Shaw, who has been chomping at the bit about this issue too, is going to call in. He's got a history of law enforcement. I know where he's going to stand on this, or at least I suspect that I know where he's going to stand on all this stuff.
Well, what I would like to do,
yes,
to get right to the Rick Perry thing, I think it would be handy if you would describe kind of the indictment process.
Oh, sure.
What kind of start from kind of what's prompted it to the indictment process.
Generally, in the legal system, there are two ways of bringing formal criminal charges against a person. You can either do what's called file a written trial information, and that's just a brief written document that describes the crime, describes the charges, describes the witnesses, and some of the evidence the state has against that person, and that's filed by a county or district attorney against a criminal defendant, or you can do what's called indict them. An indictment is where the prosecutors gather up a bunch of evidence and they present it to a grand jury. And grand juries range in size all over the country. I believe in Texas, which we're going to talk about here, it's a 12-person grand jury. Now, not to be confused with the jury at a criminal trial, the grand jury is not to determine guilt or innocence of the charges, but to determine whether or not the state has enough evidence to support the charges at a trial. And so a grand jury scheme. Now, Iowa doesn't typically use grand juries except for very rare circumstances, one of them being political corruption. I don't know if Texas has that same kind of system or if they indict everybody, but a grand jury was convened. They heard all the evidence, and I believe in Travis County, Texas, they heard all the evidence and returned a 2-count criminal indictment for abuse of power or abuse of the office, and then another charge that I can't remember off the top of my head, although I read the thing last week after you told me we were going to talk about it, against Rick Perry for activities with respect to funding of a Travis County prosecutor's office initiative. There was a program that was being funded by the state that Rick Perry tried to meddle with. So, Doc, this, to me, I read the indictment, and you're always going to get something, some kind of political spin either way on any time a politician is indicted for anything. You saw it with with Bob McDonald in Virginia. You saw it with the Clinton impeachment trial back in the 90s. You see it all the time. So what is your take on this indictment?
Well, well, first of all, I want to say that if I ever get arrested and go to jail, I hope my picture is as good looking as Rick Perry's. That's all there is.
He and Tom DeLay, they did a walkthrough mugshot. I guess they has a sped up process in Texas, and that's okay.
The second thing is you have to keep in mind an indictment does not mean that you are guilty. It
Absolutely
just
correct.
means that there's evidence that there's enough evidence to proceed with a trial. It's like if we're sitting in the studio, and Maddie happens to say, "Hey, listen, Doc came after me," and I have 2 other witnesses that say no, then the grand jury at that point will save everybody a lot of tax money and go, "Nah, nothing happened." Whereas, if it's my word against her word, then there's enough there to proceed with a trial. At least, there's something going on.
There is some evidence, and there's evidence that a jury could return a conviction of guilty on, but I do not believe in Texas or anywhere else that, and I'm fairly certain of this, so I shouldn't even waffle on the subject. It is not a reasonable doubt standard. They're not determining guilt.
No,
reasonable doubt is reserved for a guilty verdict by a jury in a trial.
So, and basically, what has been alleged is that this district attorney was drunk.
No, that's been proven. She pled guilty to it and did 45 days.
All right. You're correct about that, but the alleged part is further down the road.
Oh, I apologize.
The alleged part is that Rick Perry wanted her to be dismissed, tried to get her to be dismissed. They would not do it, so he said, I'm going to veto your funding. And from my perspective, if you give a governor line item veto power, doesn't matter what he does with it. If he's got the right to do a line item veto, he can take money and do whatever he wants. He can strike parts of a bill and then sign it. We have the same kind of thing here in Iowa.
We do. It is the perceived retaliatory nature of what happened and listen, we both know, and you never want to be indicted, even if it looks political. And as a Democrat and a liberal, I would say this looks political. I guess Travis County's got a lot of Democrats in it, but the one aspect of this that kind of leads me to think that there might be something to it is if it's purely political, this district attorney is not the person you want to ride for if you're the Democrats seeking to federally indict a very popular Texas governor. He's very popular.
Yeah.
She's had alcohol problems in the past. She did a 45-day sentence for drunk driving. Now, Texas may have stricter laws than Iowa, but in Iowa, if you are convicted or plead guilty to a first offense, OWI here in Iowa, and you don't have much else of a criminal record, you'll do a night in jail when you get picked up by the cops and have to take a 2-day weekend class at DMAC if you're here in Polk County, and that's it for jail time. They suspend the rest of it. For her to do 45 days, she must have either done something worse or they have tougher penalty.
But it's a different standard.
Right.
It's a different standard for her.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And if she's had repeated problems culminating in this, at some point,
but then
the
why?
governor has to. I mean, what would happen if suddenly whatever she's prosecuting, everybody went, well, hold on, she was drunk during the trial, or and they bring it up. Not every case that she's ever tried is suspect.
But here's my question in response to that, though. Why would the Democrats expose themselves and ride for her if there wasn't something to it, given that she is so unsympathetic? And I agree with you that she's unsympathetic.
Well, and this is part of the thing. All politics is local.
Yep.
And a lot of local people don't understand that their voice is carried nationwide.
Well, especially when you're going after a guy that's probably going to run for president in 2016.
And has run for president.
Yep.
And is very popular in conservative circles. I think you and I both agree at least a good part of this is politically motivated. Now, I'm not
maybe bringing the indictment, but it was returned. I mean, yes. You can't. It's one thing to say pursuing the investigation is political. It's another thing to impugn the integrity of a grand jury. I'm not making any statements about his guilt or innocence, and frankly, we don't care up here in Iowa. But it's interesting that they returned an indictment.
And my question would be, and we'll get to this later in the show. We have guests calling in right now, but at the end of the show, I think we should talk about: is it okay for your governor to enforce, since he is supposed to be the arbiter of not arbiter, but the enforcer of the laws? Is it retaliatory to insist this person get fired, and if they don't, we're going to withhold funding to that office? Is that retaliatory, or is that controlling your thing? I mean, that's honestly
right.
That's what it is.
And the last thought that I'll say before we go, she can't be fired. She's an elected official. So remember
yes,
that.
That's a good point.
Yep.
So we'll be back right after this break. When we come back, we'll have Tom Shaw, and we'll be discussing the Ferguson, Missouri tragedy that continues to go on down there. We want to thank all of our sponsors, Bertrosian Associates, Lubinas Law Firm, Halo Capital, Des Moines Anesthesia. Thanks, Maddie. I always forget those. That's their new number. Don't forget to check us out on Doc and Lefty, Facebook, Twitter, all kinds of junk that Jen's working on. We'll be back right after this break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Bertrosian Associates, how can I help you? Bertroche and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. You are listening to Doc and Lefty here, streaming live this evening from our website, docandlefty.com. We're in the webcast1live.com studios and certainly do appreciate all of their help. Anyway, on the line with us today, representative, super duper friend of the show, and representative of Northwest Iowa District, and I'm sorry, Tom, you're gonna have to remind me of the district number because I forget from time to time. But Tom Shaw, Tom, how are you doing?
I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of static on this line.
Oh, can you hear us okay, or is there something else that we need to do?
Oh, there, that's better. That's cleared up.
Good. I might have been talking too fast with my voice too close to the mic, but we got so much to talk about, and we only have you for a short time, and so I wanted to get to this right away. I've been following your Facebook feed. You've been following the Ferguson issue really, really closely. For our listeners who've been under a rock for the past week, there are protests in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, Missouri, following the shooting of an unarmed teenager by a Ferguson City police officer. I believe they released his name. His name is Darren. I almost gave
Wilson.
Darren Wilson. Thank you very much. I almost gave away the name of a client, and that would have been bad.
Oh, that would have been bad.
But Darren Wilson, the young man's name who was shot, name was Mike Smith or Mike Wood?
Brown.
Mike Brown. Good.
Brown.
I've been reading this all day and I can't come up with names.
Oh man, tell you what.
Mike Brown and Darren Wilson. Now, there have been protests all week, and the law enforcement response came in, and there have been intense criticism on both sides. But Tom, I think that you've taken some exception to some of the criticism of the police department. First of all, everyone knows that you're a representative here in the state of Iowa, but you also have a law enforcement background. Can you share that with our listeners for a refresher?
Sure. I did 20 years in the Navy, non-law enforcement, and after retiring in 2002, came back and joined my hometown police department. I did hold the position of chief. I resigned that when I became an elected official, but I am back and have been back working not during the sessions, off-session time as a patrol officer.
So riding around working the beat.
Yeah, about 11 years of civilian law enforcement experience, yes.
So what's your take on this this growing? Well, it's subsided a little bit the last day or two, but certainly over the weekend.
Yeah, with the introduction of the National Guard.
Right. So it's been a pretty hot topic down there.
Well, it depends on, and I want to be clear what aspect of this you want to focus on, because there's several aspects that I've been talking about. Are we jumping to conclusions and not letting the facts come out and immediately condemning this officer for his actions?
Never.
Or is it the over militarization, or the perception that the police have become over militarized? I mean, what aspect? There's so many different aspects to this whole situation, and it's quite fascinating because it falls both under your realm, as an attorney, and under Pat's realm, under the psychology, whether it's the psychology of the inherent mistrust and hatred of police or mob mentality. There's just so many aspects of this. I guess I would like to know for sure exactly what aspect of this do we want to discuss.
Well, and that's a fair point to make there, Tom, and I guess what I wanted to talk to you about specifically, now no one is making any conclusions about anything at this point, because there are certain facts we know, but there's a bunch of stuff that we don't know. For example, no one really knows for sure what sparked the confrontation between Brown and Wilson. No one knows that for absolute certainty. There are eyewitness reports that come out on one side, and certain reports come out on another side. But I guess one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is I have been distressed by some of the response to making this anything but the tragedy that it is. Now, I think that we all three can agree that a young man being shot down in the middle of the street in broad daylight is a tragedy regardless, especially when he's unarmed, is a tragedy regardless of what might be politically expedient to talk about. We'd agree with that, correct?
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely agree, and I think if you've been following my post, that is the exact point that I have been trying to make.
Right.
Yeah, with this rush to judgment.
Right.
So it's from this we have, and you're right, we have news stories that are coming in, and we've all, from the get-go, from the beginning when there was that supposed, anonymous reporter or whatever that misidentified the police officer. I mean, it started from that to all kinds of other things, all this misreporting and contradictory reporting. Nobody knows for sure what has happened there.
Well,
and that has been my entire point.
Do you have but do you have any? Would you have any response or any kind of take on some of the kind of the mudslinging against the victim that's been happening? Because that
absolutely. There's mudslinging on both sides. Quite frankly, I find it reprehensible. As a police officer, I am trained. You never blame the victim. You never take the victim's background, their status in life, or anything else. You don't blame the victim. You take the facts as they are. A victim or an alleged victim is an alleged victim.
Right.
And that's that.
And all right.
Go from there.
All right. Now we're going to take a quick break, Tom. After the break, I got a couple of questions for you, so that maybe our listeners can understand why the police have been castigated basically in the news media, and I think a lot of it has to do with the system's approach. So we're going to get to that right after this break. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're here every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on docandlefty.com. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back right after this break.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
Metro Ford's on everywhere. Metro Ford's on everywhere.
See 'em here, see 'em there. You got bad credit? We don't care.
Metro Ford's on everywhere. Metro Ford's on everywhere.
Visit emetroford.com for your guaranteed credit approval. Good credit, bad credit, no credit. Everybody drives with guaranteed credit approval at emetroford.com.
Metro Ford's on everywhere.
Visit emetroford.com today.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We're talking about the Ferguson tragedy, and we've got a friend of the show, Tom Shaw, 20 plus years of law enforcement experience here, and providing a little bit of insight on his take on some of the stuff that's been going on down there. And Doc, I know that right before the break, you'd wanted to ask a couple of questions about his take on the overall mentality of the protest.
Well, now, Tom, I mean, we're Facebook friends. I watch what you post, and you seem to be, you seem to be of the opinion that the police are unfairly being prosecuted in the press. one of the things that has been happening is the appearance that the police are not able to contain the riots down there. Can you give us an insider's perspective of the logistical problems of a 50 some odd police force trying to keep riots under control in a town of easily 100,000 that's 70% black? Can you kind of provide an insight of what the logistics are going to be for the police department?
Well, before I do that, I'd like to, I think, make a clarifying statement here. What I have been trying to battle is the misconceptions and myths of what happens in an officer-involved shooting. I am battling the myths that people see on television, and now they want to apply it in a real-world situation. As one police sociologist, a PhD, has said it, we ask police to do what is humanly impossible to do because of physiology. That gets into why were so many shots fired? How did he didn't get shot in the back, but he got shot in the top of the head. His lawyer has made a declarative statement that proves he was surrendering and had his head down. No, it doesn't. It means that because of human physiology, when the officer first started shooting, to the point when his brain recognized that he was falling, by that reaction time to get to his finger to tell him to stop pulling the trigger, an additional 3 or 4 shots can go off. So it is consistent with somebody running towards somebody, being hit several times, and as they are falling forward, the last shot hitting them in the top of the head. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but it is just as consistent, and that just provides just as much credence to the second part of the story that was saying the officer was attacked first. This man tried to disarm him. We now have the police report that the officer's eye socket was injured. It fits in that narrative. And I guess my frustration is not everybody, so many people have latched on to the initial news that he shot an unarmed man, and there's no logical explanation why an unarmed man would be shot. And I have been trying to explain how that can happen. It is logical.
Now,
but they will not. I accept the possibility, okay? I accept the possibility that this officer shot this unarmed man in cold blood and murdered him. I accept that possibly happened. But I also accept the possibility of the second narrative that is coming in. But it seems to be either or for so many people, and it's not. It's both. That's why we need this police investigation to find out exactly what happened.
All right.
Nobody knows.
Now, let's say, for instance, that it's the second scenario coming out. The officer was in fear for his life. I know that if, as a private citizen, if somebody is running me down after having beaten me up, if I shoot him dead in the street, there is a law that states that I overreacted. I used more force than was necessary to subdue the person. Do police officers have to follow that same type of doctrine?
Well, I have that brought out to me. That is not necessarily true, what your statement you just said. That a police officer is going to investigate the shooting, whether it's a private citizen or another police officer. The use of force is the same, and the criteria on the use of force would be the same. In other words, you as a private citizen would have to convince a jury that your life was in danger, just as a police officer, if charged, would have to convince a jury that his life was in danger. It is the same criteria.
Okay. Now, there's a big controversy about how much heavy equipment that the police forces around the country are getting. They're getting the up-armored MRAPs. They're getting heavy weapons. They're getting all kinds of military-grade equipment, and a lot of this military-grade equipment has been used in Ferguson. What's your feeling about that? Basically arming the police state to the teeth.
My initial reaction is I don't like it. I don't like it a bit. But what I have also been trying to point out is we're not making any distinction here. We're using the generic term of police. It is my understanding in trying to follow the story, and I may have it wrong, there's so much confusion with this. The Ferguson Police Department tried to handle the situation the first night. The armored vehicles and the SWAT members and all of that look militarized in their SWAT gear, that came from the state police, and the governor ordered that in. It was not the local police that did that.
So do you think this police chief down there in Ferguson is going to be able to remain in his job, or has he lost so much faith?
I don't know. I don't envy him. I do not envy him. I can't imagine the amount of pressure and stress that he is under right now.
All right. Well,
I just can't.
This next question kind of comes from my bailiwick. The one thing I know about mobs and riots is they only exist if there is a perception that there is no order. And if you're trying to police a predominantly black neighborhood with a predominantly white police force, do you think that there is a perception that there is no order, or that the order that exists is unjust, and that is what has led, at least in part, to the riots down in Missouri?
And the heavy-handed response. I think it cuts both ways.
I think so.
Well, we've seen media reports of. Let's just put it this way. Go ahead.
Give Tom a second to answer.
Oh, I can understand, and that's what needs to be discussed and studied. Which came first? Did the increase in violence come first, and then the state police respond, and now the National Guard, or were they sent in anticipation and they overreacted, which then caused more violence? I don't know at this point. The reports are too sketchy. This is definitely something that needs to be studied.
Okay, now we're going to take another break. Tom, do you want to stay with us? We have another guest coming on. I didn't know if you still wanted to stay around and participate a little bit, or if you had to go.
I sure do.
All right,
I would.
We're going to be back right after this break. I want to thank all of our sponsors, Doc and Lefty, of the Doc and Lefty Show, including Petrosian Associates, Lubinas Law Firm, Halo Capital, and Des Moines Anesthesia. We also want to thank all the people that sponsor the studio, keep the lights on. Don't forget to follow us on docandlefty.com, Facebook, Twitter, Google+. I'm sure we're going to have a couple other things coming out, aren't we, Jen? She says yes. So we'll be back right after the break. We're with Representative Tom Shaw, and the next person up is Harry Harris. We appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. We are proud to work with military personnel and their families. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere. Our licensed mental health therapists provide individual counseling to children, adolescents, and adults, including couples and marital counseling. Visit our website at bertrocheandassociates.com for more information, or call 515-334-9484. Our offices are located at 5525 Meredith Drive in Des Moines, just east of Skate North off Merle Hay Road. Isn't it time to talk to someone? Take care of yourself and your family. Contact Bertroche and Associates.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for the first half hour. This is the Doc and Lefty program. I am Lefty with my partner Doc here across the table. We're with guest Representative Tom Shaw, giving us a little bit of a law enforcement background. Now, on the other line is another guest we've lined up who is to kind of set him up to explain what's going on. I reached out to my my best friend in the entire world, John Becker, who is a resident of St. Louis.
Now I feel threatened.
Well, I mean, he's a threatening cat. Absolutely. Who's a resident of St. Louis, lives in St. Louis, and was kind of picking his brain to get a more local perspective. And he said, there's a guy that you have to talk to. He's an old fraternity brother. His name's Harry Harris, who is with us on the other line. And Harry, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, fantastic. Now, Harry, you don't live in Ferguson, do you, or is that where you live?
I live other side of the highway. It's about maybe less than a half mile from the Ferguson border.
Okay.
It all starts to kind of meld together a little bit, but officially in the Florissant area, which is right next to Ferguson.
Sure, but you're obviously you're familiar. Everybody's got to be familiar with what's going on down there.
Yeah. Sadly for me, one of the routes that I take to work, or I can take to work, go right through all of that. And, for 10 years, I've, driven down the street, and to see all those images on TV is just heartbreaking. I've been to that Quick Trip. I used that Quick Trip. I used the Walmart that was broken into. And it went further. There's more damage, I think, that was done that you probably didn't even see. You didn't see on TV. And yesterday I took my son. He's been asking to go to the Toys R Us, which is in the same shopping plaza as the Sam's and the Walmart you might have seen. And I go in there, and we're kind of walking around, and I'm thinking everything's okay. And I start looking, just the electronics section is cleared out. I mean, the cases when you walk in where they lock up video games and things, gone. One of the employees told me all the tablets. So you see this at stores that you shop at, and we went to different places on Sunday and boarded up windows and things like that, and you feel like you've been robbed because these are places that you're in every day. Seeing that Quick Trip burn down, it's not my house, but that's what I used.
Sure.
It's really hard.
Now, Harry, there's kind of a question up here and nationally as to just how widespread the rioting has been, and there's some reports, there's some sense that the rioting has been fairly localized to specific areas, while the larger protests have been more peaceful, and that's been kind of overshadowed by what have been termed by some as a few bad eggs. Is that your sense of it down there?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's two main thoroughfares that run through Ferguson. So you've got a West Florissant, and you've got Florissant Road. West Florissant is where you've seen like the Quick Trip and all of these confrontations and the tear gas and all of that. Florissant Road is where the police headquarters is located. So when you've seen shots like that out there, you're not having the violence in front of the police station. You're having some people are on the sidewalk and mostly protesting during the day there. It's West Florissant, which is, again, one of two major arteries for that area. That's where all of this is happening.
That's interesting. Now, one of the things that can never be decoupled from a situation like this, especially when you have a person of color and a white person involved in this kind of tragedy, is the racial aspect of it in a community like Ferguson, and the news has been replete with descriptions of a white police force and a black community. Is that something that is on people's minds all the time? Is that being over-reported, or is it being properly reported? What's your sense of that?
The thing that I've come to learn in all of this is that everybody has different perceptions. You have some facts. Obviously, it's a fact that the police force is mostly white. But then you start to get into perceptions of, is that causing a problem? Mm-hmm. I've lived in my house. I grew up here. I grew up not far from this exact location. I've been a St. Louis. I am St. Louis native, resident, everything. I have not felt that Ferguson has had this racial divide problem. I am a person of color myself, and I had not seen this until now. And I think my first reaction to a lot of this was when people started going on shows or people started passing this narrative that Ferguson is racist. I turned on Meet the Press on Sunday, and there's a gentleman from Harvard who's saying Ferguson is racist. I'm like, you haven't been in Ferguson. You don't know Ferguson. I live next to Ferguson. I go there every day. That's not the case for me. I've never been pulled over by a police officer. I've never had in Ferguson. I've never been pulled over. I've never had a bad interaction in Ferguson. I go to their summertime events. You know, I take my family there. They put on July 4th picnics that are open and free for the public. You know, they're doing things to build a new center where, you know, youth and things can go, where they have something to go to. They do an annual 5 and 10K run and a 1 mile fun run through the city streets of Ferguson. That's put on. One of the lead people there is a person of color. There's people, black, white, every color, every ethnicity, working together to put on these events. You see the police lining the streets to help with stuff like that. So it's really disheartening for me, from my perspective, to hear that Ferguson is such a bad city.
And it's
also,
go ahead.
But I also have to accept that there may be some people that are having bad times or have had a bad situation.
And I wanted
to speak for them.
And that's fair enough. I wanted to have Tom respond quick, not necessarily to your personal experience in your hometown, but Tom, we've had these sorts of, and I don't want to downplay what a lot of folks are feeling, as if they're feeling racial tension. We don't want to diminish that, and I know that you would never do that. But how can some of these maybe these racial components that may have where tensions are high anyway and people are upset, how can that cloud some of the investigation that needs to happen so we all can kind of get to the truth of the matter, in your experience as a law enforcement official?
I was trying to figure out how I might respond to that in a coherent and quick manner.
Well, you know what, hey Tom, we can take a break while you think about your response, okay? So
that'd be fine.
We're going to take a break real quick. Want to thank all of our sponsors, Lubinas Law Firm, Halo Capital, Petrosian Associates, and Rats. Des Moines Anesthesia. Thanks, Maddie. We'll be back right after this break. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and DocandLefty.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling.
We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We have guest Harry Harris, resident of nearby Ferguson, just grew up in the area, uses the Quick Trip, and has a lot of experience on there. We're certainly appreciative to have him. We have a friend of the show, Tom Shaw, on the other line. And right before the break, I had posed a question to the representative about, in his capacity as a law enforcement officer, how do these sorts of racial tensions cloud, or if they do affect a police investigation, especially one as fraught as this?
Well, first off, let me say thank you to Harry. That's a very enlightening perspective that he gives. I really appreciate him giving that perspective. I think we need to stop looking at vengeance, and I think a lot of these types of situations end up being vengeance. In other words, somebody's been victimized and they're looking for revenge. And whether it's a police officer that thinks he's been wronged by the citizens of this community, so he's going to go out and just start picking on citizens for revenge, or whether it's the other way around. We need to start looking for justice. And justice is, if there's a wrongdoing, justice is we're searching for the truth, and we're going to provide appropriate and just punishment when we come to that truth, if punishment is warranted. And I think we need to start focusing on justice, rather than trying to go out and look for revenge for past wrongs.
All right.
I don't know if that makes sense or not. But
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now I got a question for you, Harry, since you're right down there in the middle of everything. There's a representative down there, and then the Missouri Highway Patrol Captain Ron Johnson are making a lot of statements that, quite frankly, are inflammatory. And I wanted to have your opinion on how that's impacting things and whether you agree with these statements. In particular, this Ron Johnson said that somehow Brown's death was, quote, going to make it better for our sons to be better black men, end quote. How do you feel about statements like that? And do you think statements like that are helpful to the situation?
Well, I think, unfortunately, or, however you want to look at it, we're becoming this, news bite, 24-hour news cycle. And I think a lot of bringing him in was to try to kind of quelch things, maybe giving some of the folks who were out there something that they did want to hear in hopes of calming down some of the flames. Unfortunately, I just don't agree with everything that they're saying, but I think you're going to be hard-pressed for everybody to get on the same page about everything right now. It's still a hotbed, and it's still just kind of a hot topic for everybody. But I think we're just barely getting to that point where maybe we're turning the corner of we got to figure out something to do, because the looting and the rioting, and, we had 2 people shot last night, and, I sat down for 3 hours just watching this unfold of the police getting activated in and then backing off, getting in and backing off. We're starting to get to that point where we have to think something's got to get done, and we've all got to get on a little bit of the same page. But kind of going back to what we were saying, too, earlier, I think everybody has had this mentality of wanting some sort of revenge versus really getting to the truth of what is going on. And I think that's what's fueled a lot of this. But there are some folks, and I'll put myself in that category, we just want to know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
We want the answers, and we want the truth of what actually happened. And it's almost like some of this has been taken out of order, because you normally get the answers, and then if the answers show that this was just wrong, then you have the riots, you have the anger. But all of that just came right off the bat. And I think that's when people didn't know how to deal with it, and the police and everything.
All right. So do you think that having down there in the riots, I mean, you're in the middle of the riots, do you think that the people that are rioting are really out there rioting because they feel a terrible injustice, or do you think they're rioting just to be rioting? The second part of that is, do you think if they arrested this police officer and charged him with murder, if that would make the problem go away? Because that's what happened in the Trayvon Martin case. They charged him with murder, and the riots died down. Do you think the same kind of thing would happen down there?
It's a possibility that could certainly happen. But I think you have some people who are truly feeling that this is a cause, and that this is part of some of their built up tension and anger. And this is, this somebody just opened the box and now everything's out there, and they're really getting a lot of that out. You also have some people who are kind of stirring the pot a little bit. Before I came on, I'm hearing reports of how many people were coming from places like New York and Texas and California who were arrested last night. You're like, where it's a Tuesday night, or where are all these people coming from?
There are no shortage of folks that want to pile on. I got a question that I want to ask both you guys, and Harry, I'm going to start with you. We can all agree, I think, once again, that rioting, looting, destroying of property, stealing other people, all of that is very distressing, shouldn't happen, should never happen. I think we can all agree with that. But Harry, you live down there. Do you think that the police response to the protests, and I'm sure you've heard these reports about taking care of the trying to take care of the rioting is one thing that they're trying to take care of that, but also, is there so much confusion that these reports of journalists being arrested or being assaulted by police officers, are we being fed a line there? Do you think the police have been appropriate? What's your sense there? And Tom, this is probably, you're a little disadvantaged here. because and all three of us we don't live down there. But you've been following pretty closely, and I wanted to ask you the same question. But Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, I get the sense that the police have really been trying to work. I think there was chaos at first. I think I can tell you with Ferguson, a population of 20-something thousand, you don't expect a huge riot centering around race to just break out on a Sunday evening, because that's when the first round of looting started. Nobody was anticipating that was actually going to just start and bust out there. As time has gone on, they had to try to find a way to control certain things. And a lot of people got angry about some of these journalists and things like that. But when you start to dig deeper, the police were trying to work within every means possible. They were telling people, you've got to move. You've got to get over here. We need to move this. We've got to go. When you're in that moment, and this is just my feeling, I'm going to move. I will move. I will still, say my piece, but I will move and get to where we needed to go to. And I don't think everybody was getting on page with that. And that's when you started having some of the clashes.
And Tom, your response?
Not being there, so I can't comment specifically on that.
Understood.
But in general, I kind of agree what he just said. We deal with reporters sometimes, and whether it's a simple accident scene or whatever operation you're responding to, the reporter does not have the right to get in the middle of it and interfere with what you're trying to do. And if a reporter is getting into a place and the policeman is trying to secure an area to keep citizens safe, for other people's safety and for their own safety, and a reporter gets in their way and refuses to step aside, then that reporter is wrong. The reporter is not supposed to become part of the news story.
And I think, at least in this context, most of them would rather not have been, because they would rather not have been hauled off. But I guess I have a take on some of this too, get to really quick before we have to take. I'm sure we have to get a break. I'm getting the eye here, but I guess my sense of this is, at least from some of the reporting that we've seen, is that at least from the media issues, is that some of them were complying, but maybe not complying in the fastest way. And certainly the one guy that you heard about from the Huffington Post, who was at the McDonald's, who was charging his laptop, and the cops came in and they told him to get out, and he got up and he was walking towards the door and then stopped to readjust his pack, and they slapped zip ties on him and hit his head in the window. That's one thing. But my larger point about that is that anecdote casts a pall on the police department, and it's very easy to then make that story representative of the police department and delegitimize what they're trying to do in the same exact way that I think. And so you have irresponsible media running that narrative. I also think that the rioting, starting from what were largely accepted to be peaceful protests through the area, has the reporting on that has a tendency to delegitimize what is a tragedy. What is, for the people that are protesting this, who have a deeply felt sense of injustice here, that those two things, I think, we maybe haven't talked about, and after the break you guys can respond to that. I think there are folks out there using this from both sides to serve some sort of political purpose, and Tom, like we talked about and agreed to at the beginning of the show, completely ignores that this is it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Absolutely. On that note, we're going to take a quick break. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. You can find us every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on docandlefty.com. We also are on YouTube, so if you missed the show, you can catch it. We have a YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, and then it's Doc and Lefty. We want to thank all of our sponsors, Petrosian Associates, Halo Capital, Des Moines Anesthesia, and Lubinas Law Firm. Whew, almost forgot you, Blake.
That's okay.
We'll be back right after this break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Petrosian Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. We are proud to work with military personnel and their families. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere. Our licensed mental health therapists provide individual counseling to children, adolescents, and adults, including couples and marital counseling. Visit our website at bertroshandassociates.com for more information or call 515-334-9484. Our offices are located at 5525 Meredith Drive in Des Moines, just east of Skate North off Merle Hay Road. Isn't it time to talk to someone? Take care of yourself and your family. Contact Bertroche and Associates.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're here with guest Harry Harris, resident of nearby Ferguson, Missouri, like very close. I can't remember the town that you live in, Harry, so you can remind us of that here in a second. And Tom Shaw's on the other line. And right before the break, I had kind of tossed it out there that it seems like there's a lot of a political expediency going on that's masking the true tragedy of this case. And I sort of want to get your guys' sense. Harry, do you get the sense that the reports of the cops being abusive or the reports of the riots, are these bad eggs, one apple ruining the whole barrel, or is it more systemic problems on one side, maybe the other, or both?
No, I think you've got a very tense situation. You've had at times hundreds of very angry folks who are just continuing to get fired up, and the situations are getting out of control. And I think there are cases where they've had to go in, and there's not a, hey, can you please move over there so we can do what we want to do over here? And if you could just, no, it's get up, get out, let's go. And in these kind of times, we have to expect that, and we have to respect that. And if folks are not doing that, you're going to be subject to arrest. So I don't think it's a bad apple. I think it's just, this is a very intense time. It's kind of like a war zone some nights down there when you've got tear gas going. We've had incidents of people in crowd firing off guns. Things are being thrown at the police officers. So there's not going to be a hey, please and thank you for moving. It's just not going to happen.
Tom?
Well, I once again would probably agree with him. I think of the stress that they must be under, the long hours they're putting in, probably lack of sleep, stress, not eating properly. They're dealing for hour after hour with angry people. I'm sure that some of the cops are getting short-tempered. I think that's human. Have some of them overstepped and overreacted or acted too quickly? That's a distinct possibility, but I think you're going to have that in a situation like this.
And we have to make a distinction, too. We're not talking about cops running in the buildings, dragging people out and beating them with batons. We're talking like, you've got to move now, and if you're not moving right now, we're going to place you under arrest to get you out of the situation. We've seen protests in our history, and you know where I'm going with this. We've seen protests where people are beaten down and kicked in the middle of the street. That's not what's happening. It's just getting people cleared so they can handle the situation.
All right. Now, there's been reports over the last 3 or 4 days that the police are going door to door on searches. And much like they did when the Boston bombing happened. What are either one of your opinions? We'll start with Tom. What's your opinion on that? I mean, they're going warrantless, basically door to door looking for, I don't know what they're looking for, but there's been a lot of reports like that. What do you think about that going on, particularly with our previous discussion with the up-armored MRAPs being available to these police?
Sure, and here once again we're trying to put an objectionable standard on something that is subjective, and I think Lefty will back me up with this. The requirement is against unreasonable searches. So it depends on A, what they're searching for, and do exigent circumstances dictate that a jury would find that the police officer's actions are reasonable under the situation. In other words, there wasn't time to go get a search warrant because the situation was so dynamic that they had to do this action. I can't answer. I don't know what the situation is. I don't know if they're actually doing this or if it's an unfounded report.
Right. Well, Harry, have you?
Once again, it's going to have to be determined afterwards and looked at, were these exigent circumstances or not.
All right, Harry, have you seen anything like that? And what would your opinion be if that actually was confirmed?
Yeah, from my understanding, that as far as a search has not been going on, but they have called in like the FBI to help going door to door, especially as they're trying to piece everything together to talk with folks about if they saw what happened. Because this is an apartment complex area,
right?
So there's so many people there that could have seen something or heard something, maybe haven't come forth, maybe are scared to come forth. At the memorial for Mr. Brown on Saturday, I believe, Chief Ron, he addressed this, that the FBI they've been called in, they're going door to door, they're putting tags on people's doors to let them know, hey, here's who you call if you saw something. I know they've really put out a call to get videotape from folks if they had anything or if anybody saw anything to come forth. In that community, I will say people may be kind of scared to come forth, even if they know something.
And I really appreciate the perspective. I wanted to mention just a couple of things with respect to the warrant requirement. Tom, you're absolutely right about the exigent circumstances. However, there can't be blanket exigency over a community if what Doc is saying is true. It has to be.
Why don't you explain what that is to the guys like me that aren't that smart?
When the warrant requirement and the ability to go into somebody's home for a search it has to be, and Tom, you'll be able to back me up on this. It has to be first of all reasonable, but also narrow and particular. And you have to lay out everything that justifies a search. If they're going door to door and searching houses under this sort of state of emergency, well, then it is a war zone. But I don't think anybody's declared this a state of emergency and suspended Fourth Amendment and whatever the state constitutional rights are. And so even though Tom is absolutely right that exigent circumstance going door to door for particular searches, that would be one thing. If they're using this as a means to get into every house on the block, and I know that my Liberty friend Tom Shaw is going to back me up on this 100%. You can't be having that. You have to have probable cause and exigent circumstances of a particular nature to go into a home. Also, what may be happening, and Harry touched on this, you have an apartment complex area. All common areas of an apartment complex are open to law enforcement. So the only thing that's protected by the Fourth Amendment is your actual dwelling. So if you are out in a common area of a hotel or of an apartment or a hotel or whatever, you can be picked up, you can be arrested, you can be searched under probable cause, and anything that you have with you or you've left in that common area can be subject to a search too. It's not protected in the Fourth Amendment.
All right. Now, I want to thank both of our guests who are very excellent. We're blessed to have some very good people calling in. And Harry, was great talking to you. Tom, it's always a blast talking to you. Do either one of you have any final words you want to say? We'll go with Harry first.
I'd really just like people to know and understand that we're still in a really great area. We've got our problems, and this is obviously a huge tragedy that we're dealing with. But with all the surrounding communities, the St. Louis area in general, it's a great place to live.
All right. Now, do you have Facebook, Harry?
Not a public page. I do have my own personal page, but
all right.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget to like us. All right. It's Doc.
He already has.
All right.
He already has.
Good. Now, Tom, anything you want to say? And thanks again, Harry, for calling in. We really appreciate it. Tom, you have any final words?
The more I learn as I go through this life, I've always tried to live under the fact that reasonable men will come to reasonable decisions. I'm learning more and more. We have to put the caveat on there unless emotion is involved. We have emotions here like fear, emotions of a sense of injustice, and as long as those prevail, I think people block out logic and facts and that, and we need to get back to let's set aside our prejudices, our biases, all the false information that's been fed to us. Let's sit down, logically look at the facts. Let's come up to a solution with this. Let's not allow this to happen again.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Tom, for giving us a call. Feel free to tune in anytime and call in, Tom. And don't forget to like us, right?
Oh, I know he has.
Oh, yeah, he has. All right. We want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We're here every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on docandlefty.com. Want to thank our sponsors, Bertrosian Associates, Lubinas Law Firm, Des Moines Anesthesia and Halo Capital. We also want to thank our studio sponsors for keeping the lights on for us. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Google, Twitter, Google Plus, all kinds of other things. You going to be playing anywhere this week?
Yeah, you guys got to check it out. Where my band, the J.B. Morrison Band, is playing its first gig at Altoona Palooza in Altoona. Coincidentally, they happen to name the festival after Altoona.
Amazing.
Altoona Palooza from 4 to 6 p.m. And then I will be booking it down to Pleasantville for Ed Bull's fundraiser, his tailgate down at his home in Pleasantville from 7 until whenever he kicks me out.
Yeah, and you see, and I get back to Lefty's best friends are conservatives because Ed is the most conservative guy I know, and here's Lefty out. Maybe that's why you don't run for Congress or anything.
Hey, the Democrats never nominate me. They know
that's true.
I got too many skeletons in my closet.
Jen, you got anything going on this weekend? No, nothing going on. We'll see you all back next week. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Hi, I'm Representative Tom Shaw, and I love these guys. Both of them.
Love these guys. Get over here. Love both of them.